Be talking about today, Dr. Nancy Zare and myself, about how to optimize your LinkedIn profile. Hey, Nancy.
Hey, how you doing, Justin?
Good. So we're going to talk about four things today. Do you want to walk through them, or otherwise I'll get them here?
Uh, Well, yes, and while you're listing them, I just want to let our audience know that I did a survey recently, and according to the audience surveyed, and there were quite a number of respondents, they said that the first thing that they look at in a LinkedIn profile is your headline. And I'm going to respectfully disagree, and we're going to
Mm,
talk about that in a moment.
yeah. Okay. We'll talk about headlines. That's the second thing we're talking about. We're going to talk about before that some of the elements of a high performing LinkedIn profile, the must haves for your about section. And my favorite one today is the fourth one, which I'm super excited to dive into because this is like the lowest hanging fruit, in my opinion. Some may disagree, but it's the featured section for actually driving booked calls. Very few people know about this. So we're going to talk about all four of those things today. Um, Nancy, do you want to kick us off? And the first point is the essential elements of a high performing LinkedIn profile. Give me an overview. What are those elements?
So, of course, I mentioned the headline, but it's also the photo and the banner. The banner is the largest piece of real estate that you have in a LinkedIn profile. Usually, your photo is positioned on that banner. So, be aware that you may or may want one or two or more photos of yourself. One of them is going to be your insert. Uh, the headline, as we mentioned, the about section is so key. The featured, as you said, and I always think it's important to look at recommendations.
Yeah.
Why? Because they are outside proof that what you offer has value.
Yeah, and we're not talking about recommendations in depth today. Any tips about that section for our audience?
Again, if you give, you will get. And there is an easy way in LinkedIn to request a recommendation
Yeah.
and a very easy way to give recommendations. So don't pass that by. It's an important part of your LinkedIn profile.
Yeah, it goes right. It's when someone's scrolling on your profile, they end up in the recommendations. And if the
It's
last
at the bottom.
recommendation, yeah, if the last thing they see is a recommendation from 3 years ago, it's probably not the best impression. So I like to tell folks, and I don't know if I got this from you, Nancy. I got it from somebody recently. Try to aim for 2 to 4 recommendations a year. It's not about volume. It's about some quality recommendations. And I got my most recent one a week ago. And one tip for recommendations, guys, is if you're like, well, I don't, I have one client, for example, she serves one client. That's her whole, how's she going to get, and she got a recommendation 3 years ago. How's she going to get more? Well, I've used this tactic where I meet with folks in a networking call, get to know them. And then with their permission, of course, if I give them any kind of advice or help, which is how I do things in my networking calls, after the call, I then ask them to give me a recommendation.
Exactly what I did yesterday. I do free LinkedIn audits, profile audits. And at the end of the audit, I showed her how to do the recommendations because she's just starting to
Yeah,
gather momentum. And I said, and you can start with me.
there you
And I
go.
showed her how to pull it down. And obviously, she'll write something because it was a complimentary audit and she was very grateful.
Yeah. Anything more we want to talk about when it comes to the elements of a high performing LinkedIn profile? Otherwise, I'm happy to give my 2 cents because there's a couple things here that I think are important and noteworthy.
Yes, go ahead and key that in. And as you're doing that, I want to remind the viewers that when you do a search on your name, your LinkedIn profile comes up before Google, before your website, before something else. So, this is why Justin and I are putting so much emphasis on your LinkedIn profile.
Yeah,
It, it's preparing the soil to get clients.
that's right. To follow that analogy we've been using about the spring theme. Yeah, you got to prepare the soil. A lot of people don't realize your profile is a landing page. It is a very powerful landing page for prospective partners checking you out or buyers. And I mean the key here. I hope this goes without say, but you want to have a profile photo, and you want it to have you want to be shot professionally. You don't want something from a family reunion, unless LinkedIn's not important to you. I see that all the time, but this is not Facebook. This is a way to make a great first impression. So let's talk about, do you want me to share my screen today, Nancy, and go through this? Otherwise, we'll, okay,
If
let's
you
do that.
want to, or I mean, maybe the viewer has an interest, and
Yeah,
takes a quick screenshot.
I think
We'll
sometimes it's
show
helpful.
you the points that we want to cover during today's conversation.
Yeah, maybe a little bit of a helpful follow along here for some of these things. So we're talking about LinkedIn profiles at a high level. Anything else you want to talk about the elements specifically that you want to call out, Nancy?
Again, photos are so important. Don't let LinkedIn put that, I don't know, gray and vanilla
Yeah.
um, profile picture. And also your banner, it's a big piece of real estate. Fill it in.
Yeah. Have a yeah, one of the things I like to talk about your banner is one way. This is not the way, but you want to put in there a succinct statement, not a ton of stuff. I see a lot of folks trying to shove as much words in there as possible. If you shove words in there and it looks crowded, no one's going to read it. I know that from experience. I'm a graphic designer by trade, fun fact. So have it be a short sentence about the transformation you offer. And if you're like, well, what does that look like? Well, here's a tip for you. I use it in mine. What would life look like if fill in the blank? So if you're not sure how to write your banner text, use that template. I've used it from somebody that trained me years ago on that, and it's a good one.
Interesting, because yesterday's post on LinkedIn was all about one message to one audience
Yeah.
with one offer. And that's the other thing the banner should have. There should be a call to action, in essence, an offer.
Right. Call to action. Mine's in here. It's a little small. I've got to update that yet. But everywhere on your profile needs to be about that next step. We'll get
And
to the
don't
featured
confuse
section in a second
people
here.
by having multiple steps and multiple everything, because a confused mind doesn't buy.
Yeah, and on that point, Nancy, let's talk about the headline because the headline is a little succinct, non-profile. It's on your profile, but it's also the little thing that tags along with you wherever you go on LinkedIn, right? So it's one way to get people to actually check out your profile. Do you want to speak to that?
Good point. And by the way, you're limited to about 350 characters. That's not words. Characters means a letter, a space, as well as punctuation. And as Justin just said, it carries with you when you make a comment or a post. Hence, you might even want to have it shorter because it will get clipped at a certain point, especially on a mobile device. But that headline has got to be enticing with benefits. Too many people list a bunch of nouns, what it is, quote, they do, or their occupational name. I don't want to buy an occupational name. It's like you when you go to buy a hammer, you're not looking for the hammer. You're looking for the ability to get the nail
Yeah,
pounded into the wood.
yeah.
And this is why you want the benefit rather than the what's called a feature.
Yeah. And it's also good. You can always put your title in there somewhere, right? Because you have room, right? I have, for example, here's a title. I don't put in here founder, but I do have in here speaker, right? So I can do a few things in here. I can also put a little bit of humor, which is my style. And I don't know what you think about that, Nancy, but I've heard it's a good practice, and I've found it's a great conversation starter to have. I've had so many people reference the fact that I'm a dad of five and a terrible golfer before anything else in my headline when they connect with me. And I ask
Well, it
people,
shows they read it.
yeah, exactly. So
Yeah.
people are reading your stuff. Why not make a positive first impression? Put something in there that is human about you, not just your professional experience.
Perfect, because you don't have a second chance to make that
Yeah.
first impression.
That,
And of
yeah.
course, anyone who knows you, Justin, knows that you are an easygoing guy. You do have a good sense of humor, and you're very much a family man.
Yeah, yeah, those are all things I want people to know. It's great. I've met so many people on LinkedIn who are dads of five as well. I'm like, whoa, there's more than one of us, and it's just a good entry point to conversations with prospects and partners. So let's anything else about the headline, Nancy? Anything else you want to touch on when it comes to
Again,
that, or
make
should we move on?
catchy, make it a hook, make
Yeah,
it benefit rich.
yeah. Benefit rich. It's hard to see the inside of the bottle when you're on the see the
And
label from
that's
the
where
inside, right?
someone may want to consult someone to help them, or use AI possibly. By
Hmm.
the way, if you're not familiar with Perplexity, which is a great AI tool, put your name in Perplexity and ask Perplexity what it knows about you, and
Mm,
you may find that headline.
that's
Not
a
in
neat idea.
a hooky way, but in a vanilla way.
Yeah, it's one way. I like that. It's one way to get outside of your own head, so to speak. We often, even myself, I've talked to other mature LinkedIn users, and it's funny how many of us, you think we'd have it all together. We're still like, is that the right way I want to talk about it? Is that the right headline? And sometimes you nail it, and sometimes it's a process of figuring it out over time. But yeah, massive piece of real estate to get people to actually visit your profile. Well, you said earlier, a confused mind doesn't buy. Let's talk about the about section. Recently in LinkedIn, this moved up compared to where it was before. I think the featured section or some other sections were above it. So it's way more important now. Tell us about, how to maximize the use of the about section, Nancy.
Assuming that the reader has now looked at the profile, seen the photos, read the headline, and they say, this is an interesting person. In other words, you've had to pass a test for them to get to the about section. And the about section, I believe there are several ways to go about it. Some people make it a very sales pitch and about what they do and what they offer and so forth. I actually think it should be a bit more personal. Yes, you want to talk about the business that you founded or are directing, but people also want to connect with real people. Uh, don't make it so generic that it could be anyone's about section. Make it personal to you.
hmm I see a common one in folks that are kind of new to LinkedIn is they kind of put a summary of their professional experience there. Um, let's assume somebody's doing that. What's the number one? You've given that tip of like don't make it about you, but any advice for formatting that and templating that? Are there anyone online we should be looking at? Now, you and I are not per se copywriters per se, but we have written a bunch. So, any tips for getting that about section revamp started?
If you're the person again who tends to list like a resume your job experience, remember there is a section in LinkedIn called experience in which you actually will list those occupations, and you have a chance to even explain some of the primary objectives and achievements that you made while at that position. So I recommend again that you think about who your ideal audience is. Remember, one message, one audience, one offer. Who is that audience that you truly want to captivate and you want to magnetize to you? When you understand that ideal client persona, write to that person. Do you call that person Jake or do you call it Sarah? Give it a name and write to that person.
Mm.
And then the about section will become across as more human, more authentic, more personal.
Yeah. One way I think that's a good start. As you're saying that, I'm thinking, well, if you've ever talked to anybody in a sales call or even in a get to know you call, networking, and they ask, okay, what do you do? Who do you serve or something like that? And you go to answer that, um, and it's you're getting responses from folks like, oh, they get it and it's clear. Why not just take that and write that down? Because again, assuming it's a vetted because a lot of people are really bad at the elevator pitch, so to speak. But assuming you have a vetted, well tried and true elevator pitch, put that in there. Because it's going to be about the benefits, it's going to be about who you serve, it's going to cover all the basics. One thing I'll say, I've been on LinkedIn a long time, and a lot of people have a lot of opinions about how how it should be in the words. And I even had somebody recently go through my about and they said, well, you need to change it to this. And, I've seen there's a lot of good ways to do it. And there's a few bad ways to do it. And all we're saying is try to avoid making about yourself. Like you said, Nancy, I like that. Make it about your viewer. Use you more than I. And I'm not saying my about section is perfect here, but do also formatting wise, try if you can break it up into little sections like this because I don't know if you've ever seen the pattern of how we read online. It's not like how we read books. I think a lot of people need to know that. I come from a graphic design, web design background. People read in an F pattern. They read the first part a lot, a little bit of the next, and then they skim read the whole first line of everything else until they see something they like and they dwell on that. So make sure you make this easy for someone to skim.
Plus,
Don't chunk
for
it out.
most of us, 70% approximately of viewers on LinkedIn are using their mobile device. So, by making shorter sentences and putting spaces between them, it makes it easier for them to read and comprehend. So, a very good point about the way people read in the F fashion.
Yeah. And that's really the only place on the profile you have to worry about that. The let's see. We can dive right into the featured section and
Yes,
then
let's do
open
that.
it up to questions. So this is my favorite opportunity that a lot of people are not aware of on LinkedIn. And if you don't mind, I'll talk about it. I'll dive right in. So a lot of people will try to put their best of the best posts they've ever had in their featured sections. But if you notice my featured section, what do you see? You see one thing. This is probably a little too extreme, and there's more to it than that. We can talk about that. But I don't recommend, what I do recommend, instead of having your best of posts, like, oh, this is my highest performing post, or this is a customer testimonial, you want to use your featured section as a way to make it absolutely clear what it looks like to work with you, what it looks like to take the next step with you. Now, most people don't realize you do have in your contact info up here a website. You can put a website and a booking link and all of that. You can also have a button right here called visit my website. We didn't mention that, but these are key things in the modern day LinkedIn profile that will take people from your quote rented territory to your owned territory, like sign up for my newsletter, things like that, right? Those are important. But if you want to make those front and center, the featured section is where to put that. So you can see here, I've put my call to action, takes someone to the website, and it's very clear what will happen if you click on this link. A free mini course on LinkedIn video for leads, become a thought leader video. Somebody clicks on this, they're going to go to my website and there's a sign up page to get my mini course on videos. What are some other examples you could put here? There's things like your account, book a time, book a, is video a good fit for me? Let's find out in 15 minutes. That's one I've used in the past. Links to future events. I've done that for events I've done. The point is you're leveraging it as an unmissable area to show people how they can take the next step to work with you. And you're not burying that somewhere in your profile or doing this, which is to assume they know what the next step is. People often don't know. So I would do no more than 3 of those images. The other tip I'll give you, and we're diving deep on the featured section. If you add an item and you want to do this, 2 things you need to know. When you go to add this kind of graphic to your featured section, you want to add it as a link, not as a post or anything like that, or as media. Add it as a link. You put the link in here. Let's say I'll put my my website and I click add here on the right. You don't want to put anything in the description. And the reason for that, for whatever reason, if you put any words in the description, you're going to end up having somebody have a pop up with that description, and you still have to click view more, and then they have to be taken to that link. So if you want them to go directly there without clicking view more, that in between step where they could potentially get confused and click away, don't put anything in the description. Instead, add a short sentence. It's called the title here on LinkedIn about what they're going to be able to get from clicking on that link. And it will give you a default based on what link you gave, right? If it's Calendly. So change that, join 10,000 other people in our newsletter, or see what everyone's talking about, assuming it's taking them to a testimonial page, right? You want to put that as your title. And then the thumbnail is a custom. This is the second part of the featured image. It will draw whatever image it can from that source that you gave it, whether it's Calendly or your website. This is not by default probably going to hit it on the head for you. What you want is a custom made image, 16 by 9 in dimensions. I don't know what that comes out to pixels. I always forget. But the idea is it's wider than it is taller, and it has a very clear, short call to action. What is on the other side of this click? And you can actually upload that. There's a little pencil button. I can actually upload that here and then have a title to go with it in the link. And you hit save, and it will show up on your featured section, and you can move those around. You can have your first most important one on the left, and you do that by clicking the pencil button and then moving them around. So that's the biggest thing that I think a lot of people, even mature LinkedIn users, have no idea about. Nancy, have you seen that at all?
No, I was actually learning from you. I didn't
Yeah.
realize about putting the description underneath, etc. So, really good points that you made.
Absolutely. Yeah. The other one I just remembered, we are talking about elements of the page. Something I recently learned is that you will probably have at the top right corner of your page a section here that has your school, By default, it shows your school, and then it also shows the most recent job you added to your experience down here. So I found out this the hard way. I am a consultant with the Gerson agency with Mitch Gerson and his team, and I added this experience after I added my business dialogue. And what happened is LinkedIn said, "Oh, that's your most recent experience. Let's put it up at the top." So I was advertising the Gerson agency front and center and my school, and there was dialogue nowhere to be found. So the way you change that is you want to click on the pencil button, and you want to make sure through some various clicking and various points you can uncheck show school in my intro if that's not important to you. And I've talked to people about this, and they say, well, what if I'm trying to connect with alumni of my school? Then definitely keep it there. But if it's not, like, nobody cares about UW Eau Claire for me. It's not a note where it's not UW Madison. There's no heft behind that. I don't want that to be a distraction. So I remove that. And then when it comes to your current position, you want to make sure that you show current company in your intro. And then you can, I don't know the exact settings. It's been a while since I touched this, but you just basically want to go into those settings under the pencil and make sure the company you want to feature is the one you're featuring. Because if somebody clicks on that, they're going to go right to your page on LinkedIn. And you don't want to basically give free advertising to, like, especially if you're like a fractional CRO or whatever, and you add that client to your profile, you want to make sure your business shows up, not your clients on your profile.
Good points. Because remember, this is what people will look at before they contact you. Most people do a good reading of your LinkedIn profile to determine whether it's worth their time and effort to then reach out.
Exactly. So make it easy for people to understand how to do business with you with the featured section. Don't forget about some of the details. And don't forget to add your website or whatever it is you want people to take as a next step as a
So
button.
we
Again,
we called this particular session, and by the way, there are three more to come. We called this planting seeds in essence, because to optimize your LinkedIn profile is preparing the soil and planting seeds. Because this, before you do anything else on LinkedIn, your profile needs to be able to attract and not repel your prospects. And if that profile is immature, it's not developed enough, you don't have your photo, you don't have an about section, etc., you're actually going to turn off people from viewing you and reaching out and seeing you as someone that they want to connect with. And that's the reason we started with your LinkedIn profile. But we have three more sessions coming up. How about we dangle a little trailer
yeah,
in
let's talk
front of
about it.
everyone?
Yeah, absolutely. So the next one I'm excited about, because this is my big forte area, is become more visible. And we're going to talk about the myth that everybody believes about posting on LinkedIn, right? I won't say what it is, but there's definitely a misunderstanding of what posting buys you, and how to actually use LinkedIn to get visibility with the right buyers.
Yeah, yeah. This is the exciting thing. So, and that next session is coming on the 20th, correct?
19th, I think. So it's Wednesday
19th.
next
Sorry.
week, same time, 11 Central.
Perfect.
We'll be talking about how to become more visible.
Yeah. So tune in. You need a LinkedIn strategy in order to succeed on LinkedIn. And hence, we're going to lay out all the elements, not just on your LinkedIn profile, all the things you can do to optimize your ability to attract and leads and turn them into clients.
Absolutely. I'm excited for that. And we've got more to come. So stay tuned, everybody. If you're not sure where to find the links to that, just DM Nancy or DM me, or put a comment. We'll see that, and we'll be able to respond to point you to the next event, so you can further understand how to get business from LinkedIn. Because guess what? You can. It happens to me, happens to Nancy, and it just requires knowing some things. And we're going to teach you that.
To our sales success.
All right. Thanks, everybody, for being here. See you in the next one. There we go.
Okay.
It is all recorded.